Yeah, the
Uh,
problem is half of the Pokemon you mentioned aren't actually going to be fighting type in the
right.
canonity of it all.
Oh, I
Canonical
mean,
Alchemy.
yeah, or yeah, the canonicity.
Yeah, that thing.
I could have sworn it was canonicity, but okay.
No, actually, he like Meatball like opens up a book. He's like, actually, the word is canomelopony. Bug type is an underwhelming type pretty much all around. It didn't have a lot of great attackers in the first three gens, and it's also very weak defensively throughout all generations. Volcarona has been good, Caesar has been good, but neither I wouldn't attribute to it being a bug type. It also, bug type doesn't have any purposes that it can fulfill on your team, at least in doubles, maybe probably in singles as well, that other types can't either do simultaneous to another purpose or better or more efficiently than bug types. So outside of Caesar and Volcarona, those are kind of like outliers for bug type, but the bug type is not what makes those outliers strong. And it just doesn't have any remarkable qualities or even average qualities in our opinion. So we're putting bug down at the bottom of D tier.
All right, dark types, they're pretty solid, of course. The immunity to psychic is pretty good. It was also a pretty good typing in TCG apparently for like 5 years. It was super solid. And a lot of dark types, for the first four gens, it wasn't that great. There are a few good ones though. Umbreon was definitely a big one. Tyranitar, Weavile were the huge ones. Then afterward, there were some really solid dark types. Scrafty was huge. Hydreigon, Mandibuzz were pretty big. Incineroar and Yveltal, of course, or Shifu Grimmsnarl. There's a lot of solids, I think, for this typing. It's really good offensively. Defensively, it might not be the best, but I think there's some really good balance between the offensive ones and the defensive ones. And it's just a pretty good type overall, I would say. So we put this in A tier.
All right, so third up is Dragon, and I think that we have to say pre-Gen 6, Dragon was not at all checked for 15 years, and I would put it at the top of S tier if we were only in the middle of Gen 5. But Gen 6 introducing Fairy and giving it a much needed weakness while also balancing out the type chart definitely helped in bringing it down a peg, but it's still nutty. You get moves like Special Draco Meteor, you get physical moves like Dragon Claw and Outrage, the quality of Pokemon like Garchomp, Salamence, Kingdra, all of these different Pokemon, especially legendaries. Half of the legendaries are in Ubers and are because of the dragon type and how much offensive pressure they can get from that. Because of that, I would say that dragon is indeed the top of A tier.
Electric typing is a solid type. We don't think it's amazing or horrible. The Pokemon tend to be frail, which is one of their main weaknesses. They don't have a lot of bulk, but they do have offensive qualities like Thunder and Rain. They also have utility qualities like Nuzzle, Paralysis, and the electric terrain, which stops grounded Pokemon from being put to sleep, and it also raises the damage output of electric type moves. Another strength of electric Pokemon is that they are typically fast. There are a lot of fast electric Pokemon, and speed is quite important in the VGC. Although electric doesn't have great defensive quality stat-wise, it does resist steel, and steel is a really strong typing. And it does only take super effective moves from ground type. Earthquake is kind of like a staple, really strong move in the video game, so that isn't the best type to be taking damage super effectively from. But we think Electric, with all those qualities mentioned, is around the middle of the tier list, and we dropped it into the B tier.
So Fairy type was introduced in Generation 6. It was really huge at the time because it was immune to Dragon, which was a pretty broken typing pre-Gen 6, being super effective against it. And a lot of the normal types turned into Fairy types, and it was pretty huge. There were some really strong Fairy types out there. Xerneas, the Tapus, there's Zacian. It's a really strong offensive typing. There's very few types that resisted. 3 out there, which is Fire, Poison, and Steel, and it is really solid overall. The only downside to fairy is there's a pretty big difference between the really good fairies and then the other fairies are generally just not really that great, such as like Grand Bull, Mr. Mime. They don't really have much usage, I feel. So overall, it's a really solid typing. It is super strong. There aren't that many fairy types out there and a lack of fairy support moves, so I would say this is a pretty solid A tier though, because of how strong the type is in general. But there is a pretty big difference between like the good fairies and then just like Pokemon that have average stats that are just fairy type.
Fighting is just a meddling type. Offensively, it's okay because it has close combat, but when you look at it specially, what is Focus Blast but a move that misses 70% of the time? The quality of Pokemon is really not there. I think Urshifu is probably one of the best ones, and it does stack a little bit better in the TCG, not because the Pokemon were actually fighting type in the video games, but stuff like Claydol in the Dominant Pearl era, Landorus EX, and Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX right now have been pretty darn good cards. And overall, I think it belongs at the top of C tier, but I don't think we could justify it being any higher than that.
Fire is a really good typing. It has bulk. It's got attack. It's got defenses. It's got Intimidate on Arcanine and on Incineroar. You've got Blaziken being a super uber banned Pokemon that's fire. Fire has Weather with Sunny Day. It weakens water type moves. So the thing that is keeping Fire for us in the A tier and not being S is that it does get hit by a lot of really good spread moves. It gets hit by Rock Slide, Earthquake, and water moves like Surf and Muddy Water, all for weakness. So if the opponent's trying to hit multiple Pokemon in the VGC in doubles, it's hitting Fire for weakness. So that's one of the main reasons why we put it down in A tier as opposed to S, but Fire is really one of the best types in the Pokemon video games.
So next we got flying types, and flying types are pretty solid. Immune to ground is fantastic. There are a lot of great support moves for flying. Tailwind is a huge one, competitive. Defog is great in singles. And of course, Max Airstream, one of the best max moves out there besides the gigantic max moves. Increasing speed is really important, especially in the Dynamax format that we have in the current generation. There's a lot of great flying types out there in competitive, and I mean a lot of them, especially like the legendary trios. Those flying types are absolutely fantastic. And there are still a lot of good flying types out there, and even the ones that aren't that great competitively, they're actually really good in Nuzlocke especially. I think flying is a super solid typing, and I'd give it an A tier personally, but my colleagues think that this is more of an accompany type than the actual typing, so overall we rank this in a B tier.
All right, so next up on our tier list here, we've got Ghost, and I like to describe this type as when it's the best, it is the best. When it's the worst, it is the worst. Now, the Pokemon in this typing are really good when they're on the top of the tier. Like Mimikyu, you have Aegislash, Gengar, and Dragapult as one of our most recent ones. And the offensive capabilities of the typing are insane too. Shadow Ball is a great special move, and you have multiple different flavors of physical moves, like Shadow Sneak for priority, Phantom Force for a 2-turn move, Shadow Claw, Shadow Punch, which can't miss. There's, quite frankly, you can't really go wrong with the type, and I mean, I'd be remiss to forget about Shedinja. Like, Wonder Guard is one of the craziest abilities, but it also has 2 immunities, but those 2 immunities being normal in fighting kind of are middling, so it's not that important. And overall, I think that makes it around average in B tier.
For grass type, it has a lot of standout Pokemon, but as we've said for some of the other lower tiers as well, its good Pokemon are really good, but they are few and far in between. One of the outliers that are really strong for grass would be Rillaboom, with Grassy Terrain and Grassy Glide being just a phenomenal offensive Pokemon. And then there's also Gmax Venusaur, which is pretty good currently. Amoonguss is one of the best Pokemon ever, and it has Spore, which is really, really good. But overall, grass can be a little frail because of all the weaknesses it has. So even though it's not one of the lesser defensive stats, defensively statted typings, it is weak to fire, it's weak to ice, it's weak to bug and poison as well, and flying. There's just so many things that can hit grass Pokemon for weakness. So we do have it in C tier.
So next we got ground types. Ground types are really solid. They are immune to electric type attacks, which is really great. And there are a lot of solid ground types out there. There are Pokemon like Groudon. Primal Ground is absolutely insane as well. There is Landorus, the infamous Landorus. Both forms are really good, with the Life Up Sheer Force Landorus Incarnate form and the Landorus variant, which is infamous. Zygarde is pretty solid when it isn't like a restricted Pokemon, and like Doubles OU is pretty solid. I'd say there are a lot of great ground types out there. The only reason ground type is probably a bit lower here on our tier list is because There are immunities because of the flying types out there, as well as Pokemon that have levitate, and there are a lot of Pokemon that have levitate. So that is a little bit of an issue that ground types do have. And some of the stats aren't the most solid for ground types, and there are some pretty much some ground types that just aren't that amazing. But overall, ground type is a pretty solid typing in general, so we gave it a B tier.
So next up is ice type, and dear lord, this type is so middling. It's just god awful most of the time. The quality of Pokemon that are like pure ice types are really bad. Like you have like Glaceon, for example. Like they just get hit really hard by a lot of weaknesses and don't really hit the relevant things. It's super effective against grass and dragon. Sure, I might have bumped it up to the tail end of C tier if this was pre-Gen 6, but it's not. We already have Fairy and we have Dragon to check itself. Good Pokemon that are in this typing, though, are generally carried by their other typing, like Lapras or Mamoswine. And the quality of move, at least, is good. There's a reason that water is going to be pretty high up in the tier list later on in this video. But being able to have special moves like Ice Beam, uh, stat reducing moves like Icy Wind that also do damage, and physical moves like Ice Punch and priority like Ice Shard, it makes the type better than Bug, but I wouldn't say it's better than much of anything else.
Normal type is an interesting one. It only resists, well, technically nothing. It's completely unaffected by ghost types, and it's only weak to fighting types, which is really good. There's a lot of normal type Pokemon, and there's also a lot of normal type moves, and they get some really interesting and quite useful competitive utility moves like Yawn and Protect and Follow Me, which are seen on a plethora of different Pokemon and competitive teams. It also has Fake Out, which is a really good, I guess, offensive move because it deals damage, but also for the utility of the guaranteed flinch. So there's great normal type moves, but also some normal type Pokemon that are good. Some of the specific Pokemon that are good from the normal type include Snorlax, Regigigas when paired with Galarian Weezing's neutralizing gas, and the infamous Smeargle that can learn the Dark Void from Darkrai, but of course that is banned. So we've put normal in B. It's not incredibly exceptional, but it's pretty good, and it does have some great utility moves.
All right, next we got Poison. And Poison was a pretty bad typing before Gen 6 because of the fact that it was only super effective against grass types, and most of the grass types out there were usually part Poison type. So that was pretty pointless. It does have some decent support moves with Toxic. Toxic, of course, the status is amazing. And of course, Toxic Spikes were pretty solid for the most part. But most of the poison types out there are pretty lackluster, especially compared to the stats. There are some pretty strong outliers, though, specifically in Venusaur, which is a big Pokemon, Gengar, of course, and there is Toxapex and Amoonguss, which are really solid poison types. But otherwise, for the most part, poison is just a really lackluster typing, and that's why we ended up putting it in the C tier.
All right, so next up we have the Psychic type, and if this was like some of the earlier games, I would say that this belongs in a much higher tier than B, but overall, Psychic is still a really good typing. It hits very hard, specially with stuff like Psychic, um, and other moves are okay as well, but that's probably your main one. And for physical attacks, you have Zen Headbutt, which is unfortunately 90% accuracy, but what else are you going to use? Frickin' Psycho Cut? There's also a ton of great Pokemon in this typing. You've got Gardevoir with the part Fairy typing. You have Metagross with the part Steel typing. You have Cresselia. You have Bronzong for setting up Trick Room. And of course, we have some pretty good restricted mons, like both forms of the Rider Calyrex as well as Latias. And Psychic is one of the types that also gets Terrain. Psychic Terrain increases the power of Psychic type moves by 30% in Gen 8, and also prevents priority moves, which is pretty broken when you have a lot of Fake Out users running around. Um, Overall, I'd say that this is the top of B. I wanted to put it at the bottom of A, but I think we all can agree that it goes top of B.
Rock is not an amazing type, but it does have Rock Slide. Rock Slide is one of the most iconic moves of the VGC. You know about it whether you're using it or you're on the receiving end, and using Rock Slide with Stab is really great. Rock also has a weather condition, Sand, and Sandstorm damages all Pokemon that aren't Rock, Steel, and Ground, and it also gives Rock a special defense boost, which is really good. Now, those are some awesome qualities, but Rock is weak to fighting, grass, ground, steel, and water. Ground and water are going to be pretty popular typings, and that was one of the things that held fire back. But Rock is also a type that also gets added on to other Pokemon like Rock Ground types or Rock Steel types, and you kind of wish it didn't have that Rock typing because it holds it back, giving it extra weakness or even boosting weaknesses to 4 times weaknesses. It also has Stealth Rock, which is a great utility move, and it has some good Pokemon like Tyranitar and Stakataka, but it has more weak qualities than strong qualities, leaving it below average in the C tier.
All right, next we got steel typing. Steel typing is one of the most solid typings out there, if not probably the best typing. It has so many resistances, and in Gen 6 prior, it was actually resistant to both Ghost and Dark until it was changed in Gen 6. However, it was able to resist Fairy in Gen 6, which is absolutely huge because Fairy is a really insane typing. But yeah, in total, it has about 9 resistances in the current state of the Pokemon typings, and that's pretty huge. A lot of steel types are really solid, especially whether it's competitive, Nuzlocke, whatever. It is still going to be a really solid typing at the end of the day. There are really good steel types like Metagross, for instance, Celesteela. It's such a solid typing. I think this has to be one of the top, if not the best typing out there. So we do put this in an easy S tier.
All right, so last type on our chart here is the water type, and quite frankly, this is one of the most insane types we have. It's the most populated type in the Pokemon game's history, and it has a lot of utility and great Pokemon under it because of it. There's great Pokemon like the restricted Kyogre, as well as like Tapu Fini. There's plenty of other water types that I'm not mentioning, like Drizzle users, Pelipper, and Politoed. I could mention so many others, but I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet. So, Rain is a really good boost to the water typing, which is why things like Politoed and Pelipper are really good. You have Swift Swim users that get a boost of speed in the rain, and being able to power up water type moves, I think it's by 50% in the rain, is also pretty busted as well. And water types only have 2 weaknesses. Grass is not that relevant as an offensive typing. Electric is a bit, things like Thunderbolt can hit pretty hard, but there's also like water ground types. Not that they're relevant, but you know, I like to stick it to the electric type a little bit. There's great moves here. You have Scald, which can burn. What other types have that much utility behind it, being able to hit for both different damage and do a status condition of an unrelated type? Surf is a great multi-targeting move. Waterfall is a great move that can hit physically and flinch. Overall, and plus, like even in the TCG, you had great times during Gen 6 and 7 when you had Greninja XY base and Greninja break legal at the same time. Aquabox was able to be played with like Lapras GX. Seismitoad EX was playable in early XY format. Overall, this just belongs in S tier. Right below Steel, it's probably equivalent to it in my opinion, but overall, Water is definitely just like insane.
Thank you all for watching our video ranking all of the types of Pokemon. If you agree, disagree, or somewhere in between, be sure to leave it down in the comments below and subscribe to Beastcoast Pokemon for more awesome Pokemon content. You can also check out our own channels, Celio's Network, Chaotic Meatball, and James Beck VGC. Links for that will be in the description down below. Until next time, have a great day and thanks for watching.